This lecture is going to concern the Neanderthals. And the Neanderthals were the last of our ancestors before straight out Homo sapiens sapiens ourselves emerged. I should point out that it used to be thought that they were very much a different species, but as it turns out, they're very closely related to us, so much so that we now know that due to genetic studies that we interbred with them and had viable offspring. And that's pretty much the definition of a species. So this is, they're now called Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. We are Homo sapiens sapiens. So it's just a different subspecies. It's not a different genus or species, just different subspecies. You can see on the slide this skull from La Chapelle in France and the bones. There's just take my word for it here. These bones are a lot more robust and thicker than our bones. They were very sturdy, the Neanderthals, very, very sturdy. On their skulls, the cranium extends back a bit farther than ours, and their face has greater prognathism. That is to say, the face juts out a bit, and it's not completely under the brain like ours is. And they also have these what's called supraorbital ridges. That is to say, those ridges above the eyes are very, very pronounced. This one is quite interesting because it lost, the right side of most of the right side of its mouth when it was still alive. They know that because the bone is healed over. And this was quite an old adult. So it's signs that they were taking care of each other, quite frankly, taking care of their elders, and helping them to eat or what have you, to feed them. So we now see sort of a greater awareness, and indeed some indications of culture in this species. Just pay attention to the map on the top here. Where it shows that orange, that's the sort of the spread of Homo erectus. The orange and actually the purple as well. Homo erectus being the first of our ancestors to make fire and then move out of Africa and go into colder climates. We no longer think that we're direct descendants from this. In other words, they didn't go into these Homo erectus did not go leave Africa, and then each evolve into Neanderthals or and then Homo sapiens sapiens. The Neanderthals. Well, Homo sapiens sapiens will expand out of Africa after these and replace these species. Now, the Neanderthals are after Homo erectus, and quite late in evolution. As I said, the last before ourselves, and they're basically a circum-Mediterranean subspecies. We see in the purple here Europe and the Near East. We can now add the northern part of Africa to that. So there are other, species around. But Neanderthals are a European version of our predecessors. And here we see, nucleotide, substitutions, and this is, genetic material showing that man and chimps and gorillas are quite close, and then gibbons, those are apes like ourselves. They're not monkeys like the rhesus or the Ethiops. We don't have tails, monkeys do, and skeletal structures are different. But in any case, the Neanderthals were closer than chimps. They were very, very close to us. And here we see, where the general evolution in Africa and in Europe, where it goes from Homo erectus to archaic Homo sapiens and then Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. So, here they're sort of arguing that it's a subspecies of the erectus in Europe. I'm not sure how strong that idea is anymore. The archaic Homo sapiens are just sort of a garbage bag classification because there's so many different types of skulls from the old world. They're not like Homo erectus. They're closer to us, but they predate the Neanderthals. And you can see in the archaic Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens how the cranium, though not larger than Neanderthals, a little bit smaller, believe it or not, the cranium capacity, it is well over the face, and our face is pushed underneath the brain. While with Neanderthals, it's still the face is still jutting out from a football-shaped cranium. And where we see the dates, Neanderthals going extinct somewhere around 40,000 BC. And here we see the different types of tools. Uh, the Neanderthals are in the period we call the Middle Paleolithic. And then Upper Paleolithic is since about 40,000 BC, and that's Homo sapiens sapiens, our species. The tools are different in the sense that on the Middle Paleolithic, these are core tools. That is to say, that they took a stone and they chipped away at the sides of it until they got down to a shape and tool that they liked, like this hand axe in the center of the bottom part. The hand axes continue from the Acheulean into the Neanderthals. And in the Upper Paleolithic ourselves, we made more blade-like structures, which is we have a stone and we take off a flake from the stone and then we shape the flake, okay, not just the core. There are the oxygen isotope stages. Don't worry too much about those at this point. And we also here see how the cranium is a bit different yet again. I'm showing it to you. You can see how it's the occipital bun, as it is called. The back part of our brain is elongated, and the top is not as round, and the face juts out. Interestingly enough, though, that once again their cranium capacity was a bit larger than ours. But we don't think they're any smaller. That correlation of brain size to intelligence doesn't really work that well. The extent to which they had language, we're not certain. And language is important, especially for the production of things like artwork, and culture in general, learning things and passing them down. And it's thought that since they don't have what's called a hyoid bone, they could not speak as in such a sophisticated manner as we could, but just have sort of sound systems like other animals, which maybe 10 or 20 sounds for danger or food or something. I don't know. The extent to which that is true is now changing a little bit with some more recent discoveries that show that they are involved in some symbolic behavior, which I'll talk about in a subsequent lecture. But we're starting to find some Neanderthal art. But notice with ourselves how our neck, etc., our throat comes in, sort of right in the middle of the head, and not too much protruding backwards, like in the one on the left, the ape on the left. Also, we were an erect species, and they were as well, but a bit bulkier. The heavier eyebrow ridge. I talked about that. A long, low skull and a prominent nose. And they probably come from some common ancestor. Here it says Heidelbergensis, give and take on that one, but for our purposes, that's okay. But there's question marks on that, and the first ones were found in the Neander Valley, shown on the map on the bottom, and Tal in German means valley, and so that's basically where these first ones were found. And once again, there's sites also in Iran and Iraq and Syria, so they were in the Near East, and they're also in North Africa, but not shown here. Here is more examples of skulls. The one on the left is similar to the first one we saw, where it's missing a large part of its right part of its mouth. Notice once again the supraorbital brow. The brow is sticking up out a lot, and there's not much of a forehead. It slopes backwards. And the bones underneath the eyes are a lot thicker and stronger than ours, right? So the cranium was this, our head bones were quite sturdy. Now there is a site in Iran called Shanidar Cave, and at that site was found a buried Neanderthal. And this is a symbolic act. The Neanderthal had, they studied the soil around the skeleton. They put it through a flotation device that we talked about in the previous lecture. And they found seeds of various plants that were put on top of the person after he had passed away. And so that's a highly symbolic act. It shows that they are aware of their mortality, right? And it also shows that they're starting to bury people properly, and it isn't just as if people fall over dead and they're left there. And so this begins to emerge with the Neanderthals. We call their tools Mousterian tools because one of the great sites in France is La Mousterière. And the important thing to keep in mind about these is, once again, that they are core tools. As I say, they take the stone and they chisel it from the outside, and the core in the center is what's left, is the tool. And they still use hand axes like had been used for, by the Homo erectus way before them. So that type of tool lasts for a long time and was quite useful. But we're not getting good projectile implements, etc. How these were used is uncertain, perhaps tied to the end of a long stick, and could operate as sort of a plunging spear. Not a throwing spear, but one you could use to plunge into some animal that you would hunt. So these are associate Mousterium with Neanderthals. It's after the Acheulean industry, but before our stone industry. And eventually, the Neanderthals would die out. It's hard to know exactly what happened. We used to go back and forth between us killing them off or intermingling with them to the point that their DNA just got so watered down that there's no subspecies anymore. And the latter seems to be the accepted case now because, as I said, they are finding Neanderthal alleles, little chunks of DNA in modern Europeans. So it looks like we might not have killed them off, but they just sort of got watered down and died out as a subspecies when Homo sapiens emerge once again in East Africa and then radiate out, spread out. And with that, we will end.